KBS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. You can watch us on Facebook this morning as we talk with Dr. Susan Boser, who is a professor of sociology at IUP and who somehow ended up on our news this morning, in addition to being here with us this afternoon. Susan Dahlheimer is with us as well this morning. She's a professor emeritus at IUP, a communications director for Friends of Whites Woods. And Whites Woods is where we're focusing. Ladies, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm real pleased to be here.
It's good to have you both with us. Our conversation is brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. So Susan Dahlheimer, frame this for us. What actually was done that Susan is going to talk about here this morning?
Well, one of the driving forces between about any plan for a natural area such as White's Woods is to get public input and find out what, in fact, the public wants, how the park is used. And being that this is kind of an ongoing debate for the last 27 years, there's been a lot of data collected over the years, and at each occurrence, there's the need to get new data, and that's what Dr. Boser did with her class this summer.
Mm-hmm. And that's the interesting thing. In fact, White Township supervisors talking about that yesterday. Susan Boser, let's break it down here. This particular study, the latest information that comes out. The other Susan in the studio with us, she just framed it perfectly. You know, data is not something that is usually analyzed at a point in time, but it gets more value the more you get of it and over a period of time. And that's what's happened here.
Yes, exactly. And we really appreciated very much the opportunity to do this data collection for Friends of White's Woods, and actually had proposed to do it for White Township. I taught a class this summer, an advanced doctoral class in research methods, and put them to work on this project. And we really looked at just two things. One is how does the public use White's Woods? And then also how does the public and key stakeholders look at possible changes that have been framed by the township supervisors?
Now, the easy thing for me to say is, so what'd you find out?
Well, actually, before I answer that question, there's something else that I want to highlight, because one of the dangers with sending out surveys is that if you send them to people that agree with you, you're going to get tons of information that says you were right the whole time. Okay.
Sure.
And we really, really wanted to avoid that. We wanted as balanced as possible. So we wrote up the survey, and we did send it to people associated with Friends of White's Woods, the Indiana Community Gardens, Conservancy, etc. But we also really made a point to try and figure out who might see this differently, and then send them the survey. So we went to the Chamber of Commerce. We went to IUP faculty and staff. We went to the Farmers Market Association, Create and Curate, small business owners shop. So Downtown Indiana group. So we really tried to be as diverse as possible. And then we also, though, highlighted one other thing. We did interviews too. And we did 8 interviews with people, local conservation group, local government officials, and that was really important. People involved in tourism. What role does the woods play in tourism here? And also people involved in professional forestry or forest appraisal to try and get a sense of, what are the bigger picture issues that are here. And we did learn quite a lot.
And so the result is the White's Woods Community Interest Study. And so we've broken a little bit into the methodology of collecting the data. Now becomes the process of analyzing and coming up with conclusions.
And we have done that as well. We put the students right to work on that one. And we found out an awful lot. First of all, people are using this, but it's more than just taking a hike or taking a walk. In a lot of ways, it serves as kind of a community focal point. People make connections there. They socialize there. And there's also a lot of education that takes place as well. And those kinds of things are important to the community. But in terms of proposed changes, overwhelmingly, we had 70% of the respondents. And again, keep in mind, this wasn't just Friends of White's Woods people responding. 70% of people said that they were opposed to timbering, selective timbering, and believed it was going to have a negative impact on the woods, and also a negative impact on the local ecosystem, that it could actually do damage here in the borough in particular if the timbering as proposed were to take place.
Now, is there a difference when you look at study items and survey responses, is there a difference between the amount of weight that you put on the so-called experts and the general public who might be a part of the survey? Do you add that weight?
That's a fabulous question. And actually, the way that we use it is that we present the numbers of people. Just, what's your opinion about this? Do you want this? Do you not want it? Do you like it? Do you not like it? But we use the interviews in a very different way to flesh out the picture, because the survey only says 70% said yes. But why they said yes, we don't know. Okay, and what are other implications that people may not even be aware of? So our report combines what experts have to say with what is the population, what does the public actually want? So it really fleshes out a much richer, more nuanced, more in-depth understanding of what's going on for our particular community.
So in this case, as you look at this particular study and what the experts say and what the survey respondents say, what are some of the conclusions that you come up with?
Well, in addition to the fact that the public here does not want timbering up there really of any kind, there is some really significant potential negative impact to the borough especially. A lot of it has to do with the issue of stormwater management, which is it's as anybody who lives here knows, the flooding that takes place periodically has a lot to do with the antiquated storm sewer system that's in place in the town. And when with the heavier rains that we're getting now, it's having difficulty managing it. But a big part of what is handling the water that does come down here is actually the trees in White's Woods. And if those trees were to be removed, it would have a devastating impact. The trees themselves, the root systems, absorb a tremendous amount of the water that comes down. There are 2 of the 3 streams that cause the flooding here. 2 of them come from, if I'm correct, Susan, come from White's Woods. And so if those trees were to be removed, the flooding would increase exponentially. There's also a potential for property damage because of slides along the side of that hill as it comes down into town. So it's not just flooding, it's massive erosion in that area. So those are really huge issues, and it'll be very, very costly for the borough to try and address that.
So conclusions then naturally lead to the question of recommendations. And so you have the conclusions, you have some ideas, I'm sure, about what should happen with some of the issues that have been examined there at the township and the borough level.
Sure.
So what are some of those recommendations and that would address concerns that specific people on the other side of the argument would have?
Sure. Probably the single biggest one was that people both in the survey and also the experts that we talked with expressed a lot of trouble and worries about the level of communication between the township and people who and the general public really that there's how the issue gets framed has been confusing. They say on one hand, well, we're not going to timber, and yet trees are marked. The Millstone plan came out and very clearly said, here's how we're going to timber, and the township hired them. So there are things taking place, but the absence of direct and honest and consistent communication but from the supervisors, quite honestly, is affecting, is causing mistrust. And frankly, the biggest recommendation that we would bring forward is that it's really, really time to engage the public in a thoughtful, clear, and consistent way that is grounded in facts of really what's in the best interest of the woods, but also the surrounding region as well.
Now, the study included the survey, 32 questions on that survey. That is a really broad survey that covers a lot of area. What were the areas the responses that, I don't know that you were surprised by some of them, but what were some of the ones that others might look at and say, boy, that's an eye-opener?
There were a couple, actually, I think that were surprising. 3 things. One, as I mentioned before, that people expressed that the woods was a lot more than just a place to go for a walk. It really is. It is social. It's building community in the town, and it's got a big value beyond that. I also personally didn't know about the potential impact on stormwater. management in the borough. But beyond that, a couple of things that surprised me, all of us really, was first of all, there's been discussion about the potential for bow hunting up there, and and we expected to see right across the board that everybody would be opposed to that. And while in the majority was opposed, it wasn't high. It was only 51%, had strong concerns about it. And many could see the logic of it in terms of culling the deer herd and wildlife issues. So there's possibility for that. The other thing is the possibility of electric bikes being used up there. Okay. Like a lot of other kind of mechanical vehicles are not permitted. And interestingly, people could see the logic. They would prefer to see separate trails set up because we don't want to have accidents between hikers and people on electric bikes. Mm-hmm. But there was more openness in the community than we actually expected to see. I thought it'd be a negative right across the board to all those things, and it wasn't.
Yeah. I don't want to run out of time, but I can see that I am. So the question then becomes, what next? For either Susan with us here this morning, what happens next?
What happens next? Well, there is a stewardship subcommittee which is working on developing a stewardship plan for White's Woods. So it is our hope that they will take these data and make use of them, along with the data going all the way back to 1995. We have at least 3 previous surveys. In 1995, the township actually sent a ballot to all the White Township residents and found, by much to their surprise, that only 31% supported their plan to do some work up in White's Woods. In 2007, the Gazette conducted one of their online polls, and were again surprised that of 750 respondents, only 23% supported the plan. And then in 2020, we conducted, Friends of White's Woods, a survey of people who actually use the park. To no surprise there, 98% opposed any kind of tree removal up there, but we focused on users, not the general public. Mm-hmm. And so we think we see a consistent pattern, and we hope that the committee will also see that pattern and pursue non-invasive strategies to protect the park and let it become an old-growth forest.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see, I'm sure, more from Friends of White's Woods, more from other principals mm-hmm. involved in this as mm-hmm. we continue to find out what people think and then what will actually be done with White's Woods, which is such a treasure for Indiana County and for this particular area narrowed down to Indiana Borough and White Township. Mm-hmm. I want to thank you both for coming in to visit with us here today. This is a conversation that could go on for an hour or so.
Thank you.
No problem. But we are grateful that you've come and joined us here this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for the chance to talk with you.
Our pleasure. It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. Just a minute and a half away from the top of the hour.